In this video, we will look at section B of paper 2. This is the anthology poetry section, and for you means answering a question on the worlds and lives cluster. Specifically, we will look at the format of the question, how to deal with the printed poem, how to deal with the second poem, how to structure your answer, advice on using quotations, and then final tips. For section B of paper 2, you will be answering the question on worlds and lives. One of the poems from the cluster will be printed on the page. You will answer the question by referring to the printed poem and comparing it with one other poem from the collection. You will be expected to remember this poem from memory. You have 45 minutes to write your answer. Which poem you should choose to compare with the printed poem is entirely up to you. There's no trick. Certain poems won't be more or less generously marked. The only restriction is that your chosen poem must have some kind of link to the printed poem which is relevant to the question. In other words, read the question carefully. Ultimately, you just need to choose whichever poem with which you feel you can do the best job. You should spend up to 5 minutes making notes on the two poems beginning with the printed one. In this case, a wider view. Read the question carefully, noting its focus. Here, it's the ways people's lives are affected by the world around them. Read through the poem, highlighting anything which suggests or refers to the effect of the world on people. At this stage, you're just looking for potential evidence. Afterwards, have a think and briefly jot down anything else you remember about the poem and the impact of the surroundings or the reaction of people to these surroundings, like so. Finally, return to the focus of the question. Overall, what does Seneviratne seem to be saying about the way the world around us affects people's lives? The notes on screen are fuller and neater than yours need to be because they are for illustrative purposes. If you want, you can start writing about the poem whilst your notes are fresh in your mind. Alternatively, it may be better to finish making notes on the second poem just in case you forget or don't leave enough time. I think it's best to complete all the notes before starting to write the answer, so we'll move on to the second poem. A list of all the World and Lives poem titles and their authors will be printed on the exam paper. Take a look and tick those poems which you think will link well with a wider view and how the world affects people's lives. As you can see, there's quite a choice, and you can expect that the question in your exam to allow for a broad range of possible poems. Choose one poem from your shortlist, i.e. the one you personally feel most confident in writing about. I'm going to choose In a London Drawing Room. This is because, like a wider view, it focuses on the urban environment and its negative impact on people's lives. As the second poem's from memory, it's less likely that you'll be able to go into as much detail as for the printed poem. Nevertheless, do think hard and aim to be as precise and specific as possible. Start with what the poem seems to say about the effect of the surrounding environment and how it affects people's lives, and briefly jot down your thoughts. You're just brainstorming now, so don't worry too much about whether you'll write about every one of your notes. At this stage, you're jogging your memory and putting down potential points. If possible, add some quotations or specific references. We'll look at quotations later in this video. Again, it doesn't matter if you'll use them in your answer, you've got them ready just in case. And, as with the printed poem, look at the question focus and summarise what Eliot conveys about the effect of the surroundings on people in a London drawing room. You're now ready to write your answer. There is no official or examiner-approved method when it comes to structuring your answer to the poetry anthology question. So long as your answer is clear, relevant to the task, and deals with the printed poem and one other from the collection, you'll be fine. However, this suggested approach is commonly used. Begin by analysing and explaining the printed poem. Then compare the printed poem with your choice of second poem. In this video, we will be following this approach. When writing about the printed poem, it's best to start by very briefly summarising what it is about. Note how the answer echoes the key wording of the task, the ways people's lives are affected by the world around them. Then track through the poem, picking up on your highlighted evidence and linking it to a point about the effects of the surrounding world on the individual. You should be familiar with this approach from the reading sections of the English language papers. There's also the approach to take with the unseen poem in section C. There's no need to use everything you've highlighted, but do try to say something about the beginning, the middle, and end of the poem. How a poem ends is often very important, as it's the last thing left in the reader's mind. Finish this part of the answer by offering an overview which explains the overall point or purpose of the poem. In other words, what is the poet trying to say about the world and our lives? This example answer isn't quite a full one, but it should give you a clear indication of how to write about the printed poem. Because the poem is printed for you, there's no excuse for not consistently using supporting quotations and offering a close analysis. It's probable that you'll spend 15 to 20 minutes writing about the printed poem. When you've tracked to the end, start writing about the second poem. Try to begin by commenting on a similarity with the printed poem. For the remainder of the answer, explain what the second poem has to say on the question focus. So in our example, the speaker is highlighting how the urban landscape is oppressive and cuts us off from the comforts offered by nature. As you write, make points of similarity and difference with the printed poem. Ideally, you'll spend about 15 minutes on comparing the second poem with the printed one. Here's an example answer for the second poem. A copy of the full example answer is available to download from either the ETV page or YouTube site. If you've still got time, I recommend spending time checking through your answer. However, by all means, add a conclusion if there's still a bit of time to spare. Write a 1 or 2 sentence summary of your answer to the question. There are different ways of using quotations. The add-on, don't write, I know this because the poem says, just use a colon, much quicker and better. The aside, using either brackets or dashes. The integrated quote, this is the best one to use, as it gives the impression that you are exploring the text and helps to give a flow to your answer. By the way, these different ways will work for all the literature questions and the reading sections of the language papers. For the second poem, you don't need to worry too much about writing the quotation out exactly correct. The examiner is pretty forgiving and will credit misworded quotations. All the examples on screen are fine. If you can't think of a quotation or aren't very good at memorizing quotations, remember that specific references are just as good. Here are a couple of example points with a quotation each. And the same points, but with specific references instead. Both get equal credit. The important thing is to support your points with clear and precise evidence from the text. It helps to A, show what you mean, and B, make your argument more convincing. Allow 5 minutes to check your work carefully. Make sure your points are clear, well supported, and relevant to the question. It is likely that your answer will be at least on the 3rd page somewhere, unless you have very small handwriting. However, don't be tempted to spend more than 45 minutes on the question in total. Divide the 45 minutes as follows: 5 minutes note making, 35 minutes writing, 5 minutes checking. The best answers will likely consider alternative interpretations of the poems, that is to say, different readings or different understandings of words or lines or phrases. The best answers will definitely discuss the poem's themes and ideas. Ask yourself, what does the poem say about the world, i.e. wider society and people's lives? And finally, think hard. Dig deep and use the opportunity to impress the examiner with the depth and breadth of your understanding of the poems. Do yourself proud. You've worked hard these past 2 years and you want the examiner to know it. Good luck and take care.